They wanted noise, they wanted bravado, they wanted Muhammad Ali to laugh it off or tear him down. Everywhere Ali went, the question followed him. What do you think about Bruce Lee? Two legends, two worlds, and a crowd hungry for rivalry. But Ali didn't give them what they expected. No mockery, no ego, no challenge. Instead, there was a pause. A calm that felt heavier than words. Because Ali understood something the cameras didn't. This wasn't set about fighting, it was about respect, about control, about knowing when strength doesn't need to speak. And what Ali chose to say and not say revealed more about greatness than any imaginary fight ever could. This is the rarely told story of what Muhammad Ali really thought about Bruce Lee. The world has always been uncomfortable with greatness existing peacefully. When two extraordinary figures rise at the same time, people don't ask how they complement each other. They ask who would win. They search for friction because conflict is easier to sell than understanding. Muhammad Ali and Bruce Lee became victims of that instinct, not because they challenged each other, but because the world demanded a spectacle. Ali was already larger than sport. His words carried weight far beyond the ring. Bruce Lee, meanwhile, was redefining what discipline, movement, and self-mastery looked like. Two different paths, two different languages of strength, yet instead of appreciating both, the public tried to force them into a single narrative, one that required rivalry to feel complete. Interviewers didn't ask Ali about Bruce Lee with curiosity. They asked with expectation. They leaned forward, waiting for fireworks. They wanted sound bites, laughter, dismissal, anything that could be framed as superiority. The question wasn't neutral. It was bait, carefully wrapped in politeness, designed to provoke. Ali noticed that immediately. He was not naive to media games. He had spent years watching his words twisted, amplified, and repackaged. He knew how quickly respect could be turned into mockery, and he knew that once a rivalry narrative starts, it rarely ends honestly. The timing mattered too. This wasn't a quiet discussion between thinkers. It was public, loud, and performative. Cameras were always present. Audiences were waiting to cheer or laugh. Ali understood that whatever he said wouldn't just reflect on him but on Bruce Lee as well. The crowd wanted a hierarchy. Someone above, someone below. They wanted to measure fists against philosophies, boxing gloves against martial arts myths. But Ali had already outgrown the need to rank himself against others. He wasn't searching for validation anymore. People forget that Ali was a student of people, not just opponents. He watched how the world reacted, how narratives formed, how quickly admiration turned into pressure. He knew that being compared endlessly can distort legacy, and he wasn't willing to participate in that distortion. Bruce Lee, at that time, was still being misunderstood by many, reduced to speed, exoticism, and spectacle. Ali saw echoes of his own early treatment in that oversimplified, misrepresented, treated as entertainment before being treated as human. The world wanted Ali to punch down verbally, to assert dominance with words. That's what they expected from the man known for poetry and bravado. But Ali had learned that not every moment requires performance. Some moments require restraint. There was also a deeper awareness at play. Ali understood that rivalry feeds ego, not truth. And ego, once fed publicly, demands more attention. He had paid that price before. He wasn't interested in repeating it. When legends are forced into rivalry, something essential is lost. The uniqueness of each path gets blurred. Ali knew that his greatness didn't need contrast to exist, and Bruce Lee's didn't either. They stood complete on their own. The questions kept coming, but Ali didn't rush to answer. That hesitation wasn't uncertainty. It was discernment. He was choosing his response carefully because he understood its consequences. People watching mistook that pause for calculation. In reality, it was wisdom. Ali wasn't asking how to win the exchange, he was asking whether the exchange deserved to exist at all. The media thrives on tension, but Ali had grown tired of being its fuel. He had already fought battles bigger than sport. He wasn't about to create a new one just to satisfy curiosity. There was something almost disrespectful in how the rivalry was framed, as if Bruce Lee existed only to be measured against Ali. Ali rejected that premise entirely. No man's value comes from comparison. Ali also understood legacy. He knew that years later people wouldn't remember the exact wording of his response. They would remember the tone, the intention, the respect or lack of it. That awareness shaped everything. He wasn't speaking just for the moment. He was speaking for history, and history punishes careless words. The world tried to reduce two philosophies into a headline. Ali refused to cooperate. He knew that silence or careful speech could protect meaning better than bravado. By not feeding the rivalry, Ali quietly shifted the power. He took control away from the narrative and brought it back to himself. That alone unsettled people. Some were disappointed. They wanted drama. They wanted superiority. What they got instead was composure. And composure rarely satisfies those craving spectacle. In trying to turn legends into rivals, the world revealed more about itself than about Ali or Bruce Lee. Ali saw that clearly, and that clarity guided his response. That moment marked the beginning of a different kind of conversation, one where greatness didn't need opposition to shine, and Ali, by refusing the role of rival, preserved something far more valuable than applause: truth. When Muhammad Ali was asked about Bruce Lee, people expected a performance. They expected humor, bravado, or dismissal. Ali was famous for words that cut sharply and landed clean, but this time his tone shifted. What emerged was not spectacle, but restraint. Ali spoke carefully, acknowledging Bruce Lee's speed and physical control without exaggeration. He didn't inflate praise to sound generous, and he didn't reduce it to sound dominant. His words were measured, grounded in reality. That balance alone surprised those listening. What stood out immediately was what Ali refused to do. He didn't turn the moment into a joke. He didn't lean on ego. He didn't claim superiority through mockery. Silence surrounded his words, and that silence mattered as much as the words themselves. Ali understood that praise can be just as misleading as insult when it's performative. He wasn't interested in flattering Bruce Lee for applause. He simply recognized discipline when he saw it. That recognition was quiet, not dramatic. He also didn't pretend to understand Bruce Lee's world completely. Ali stayed within the boundaries of his own experience. He spoke from what he knew and stopped there. That honesty prevented comparison from turning into exaggeration. Ali never claimed Bruce Lee was invincible. He also never dismissed him as irrelevant. He avoided extremes. That refusal to lean toward either myth or minimization was intentional. It kept the truth intact. People waiting for a bold declaration felt unsatisfied. Ali's words didn't feed imagination or fantasy. They didn't spark debate. They grounded the conversation, and grounding is often mistaken for avoidance. What Ali didn't say was just as important. He didn't talk about who would win. He didn't entertain hypothetical fights. He refused to step into speculation. That boundary protected both men from becoming caricatures. Ali knew that once he speculated publicly, the conversation would never end. Every word would be dissected, repeated, distorted. By limiting what he said, he limited what could be misused. That was a form of control. There was respect in his restraint. Not loud respect, but practical respect. The kind that refuses to reduce another person to a talking point. Ali had been reduced too many times to do that to someone else. He also avoided philosophical comparison. He didn't weigh boxing against martial arts. He didn't frame one as superior. He understood that different paths serve different purposes. Mixing them only creates confusion. Ali's response lacked the usual rhythm people expected from him. There was no poetry, no punchline. That absence felt strange, but it was intentional. Ali chose clarity over charisma in that moment. He didn't challenge Bruce Lee's ideas. He didn't endorse them either. He simply acknowledged the man and moved on. That neutrality frustrated those who wanted friction. Ali knew that words can lock people into positions they never intended to hold. By keeping his language minimal, he stayed flexible. He left space for nuance instead of certainty. Some interpreted his response as indifference. Others saw it as wisdom. Ali didn't correct either interpretation. He allowed people to take what they wanted. That freedom revealed more about them than about him. Ali also didn't speak for Bruce Lee. He didn't claim to know his intentions or philosophy. He avoided representing someone else's voice. That respect is rare in public discourse. What he said stayed within the present. What he didn't say avoided the future. He didn't predict outcomes or imagine confrontations. He kept the moment grounded in reality. Ali understood that silence can protect dignity better than explanation. He chose not to clarify beyond necessity. That choice prevented misunderstanding from multiplying. His restraint also protected his own legacy. He didn't risk being remembered for a careless remark. He chose to be remembered for composure. The conversation ended without climax. No viral moment, no dramatic quote, and that was exactly the point. Ali refused to give the world something easy. In the end, what Ali said showed awareness. What he didn't say showed maturity. Together, they revealed a man who had learned that greatness doesn't need to announce itself to be real. The silence that followed Ali's words didn't end the conversation. It extended it. At first, people barely noticed. There was no explosion, no headline-worthy clash, no dramatic follow-up. The moment seemed incomplete, but incompleteness is exactly what gave it power. Without a sharp response from Ali, the spotlight shifted. The attention no longer sat comfortably on him. It lingered awkwardly in the air. The absence of conflict forced people to sit with their own expectations, and that discomfort stayed longer than any argument would have. Silence has a way of refusing closure. When words clash, the mind moves on quickly. When nothing happens, the mind circles back. People replayed the exchange, not because it was dramatic, but because it wasn't. The quiet demanded interpretation. For those who wanted rivalry, the silence felt unsatisfying. They wanted resolution through dominance. Instead, they were left with ambiguity, and ambiguity invites reflection whether people want it or not. Ali's lack of engagement stripped the moment of spectacle. There was no reaction to clip, no quote to repeat endlessly. What remained was a question without an answer, and unanswered questions tend to linger. The people who tried to provoke him felt the shift first. Without resistance, their words stood alone. Detached from response, the insult lost momentum. It no longer felt justified. Silence has a way of isolating intent. Over time, the memory of the moment changed shape. What once seemed like restraint began to look like intention. The silence didn't fade. It matured. It gained meaning as perspective deepened. Ali's quiet didn't accuse anyone directly. It didn't shame or embarrass publicly. That made it impossible to defend against. Silence doesn't argue. It simply exists, steady and immovable. As Bruce Lee's influence continued to grow, the silence grew heavier. It became part of the context. Ali had refused to reduce him, and time rewarded that refusal by elevating both men independently. People began to realize that Ali's silence wasn't passive. It was active restraint, a deliberate choice to let time speak instead of ego. That realization arrived slowly, often unexpectedly. The moment returned to people years later, usually uninvited, in quiet reflection. In hindsight, in moments when they reconsidered how strength is expressed, silence has patience words don't have. Ali never revisited the exchange publicly. He didn't clarify, correct, or capitalize on it. That refusal kept the silence pure. It wasn't used as proof or weapon. It remained a lesson. Because there was no follow-up, the moment stayed unresolved. Unresolved moments don't fade cleanly. They settle deeper. They invite meaning rather than deliver it. The lack of reaction forced observers to confront their own hunger for conflict. Why did they expect mockery? Why did they want rivalry? Silence exposed that appetite without naming it. Ali's quiet response also protected Bruce Lee from becoming a prop in someone else's narrative. Without Ali's endorsement or dismissal, Lee stood on his own. That independence mattered. The silence followed people longer than they expected. It surfaced in conversations about legacy, discipline, and respect. It became a reference point without being quoted. Unlike words, silence cannot be misquoted. It cannot be twisted easily. It resists manipulation. That resistance gave it endurance far beyond the moment itself. As years passed, the exchange stopped being about comparison. It became about restraint, about knowing when not to speak, about refusing to shrink others for attention. Ali's silence worked quietly, reshaping memory. What once felt empty now felt intentional. What once felt anticlimactic now felt profound. The insult faded because it had no echo. Ali's silence echoed because it had depth. Time amplified that contrast again and again. People often remember what shocked them, but they live with what unsettled them. Ali's silence unsettled expectations in a way no argument could. In the end, the silence outlived the noise because it carried no ego. It didn't compete, it didn't demand agreement. It simply waited for understanding to catch up. Time did what the moment could not. It slowed everything down. The laughter that once felt effortless lost its sound when replayed in memory. Without the crowd, without the cameras, without the adrenaline of attention, the moment began to feel different. What once felt clever began to feel careless. At first, the memory returned lightly, almost as an afterthought, a passing recollection of something said and quickly forgotten. But memory is patient. It revisits moments when the mind is quieter, when ego is less loud. And in that quiet, the tone of the moment started to shift. As Muhammad Ali's image evolved, the contrast became sharper. He wasn't just remembered as a champion, but as a man of restraint, principle, and dignity. That growth reframed the past. Words once thrown casually now felt heavier when measured against the man he became. The laughter no longer aged well. It felt frozen in time, locked to a version of thinking that no longer fit. What once seemed harmless began to carry weight. Not because Ali complained, but because he never did. Silence has a way of changing responsibility. Without a reaction to blame, the focus turns inward. People began to ask themselves questions they hadn't asked before. Why did that feel necessary? Why did it feel entertaining? Why did it feel acceptable? Guilt doesn't arrive as punishment. It arrives as awareness. It surfaces when perspective matures enough to see past justification. The moment stopped being about Ali's silence and started being about their own behavior. The absence of confrontation made it worse. If Ali had responded with anger, the exchange could have been written off as mutual hostility, but his restraint removed that comfort. There was no balance to lean on, no shared blame. Over the years, that imbalance grew harder to ignore. Ali had offered dignity without asking for it in return. That kind of generosity becomes visible only with time. And when it does, it carries a quiet sting. Some tried to dismiss the memory, others reframed it, but dismissal doesn't erase awareness. The moment lingered because it had never been resolved. Silence had denied closure and guilt filled the space instead. As people matured, so did their understanding of strength. What once seemed like entertainment began to look like immaturity, and maturity often brings regret, not for what was done loudly, but for what was done thoughtlessly. Ali's continued composure over the years made the contrast unavoidable. He never weaponized the moment. He never revisited it. That restraint made reflection unavoidable for everyone else. Guilt thrives in comparison, not between people, but between versions of self. The person who laughed then didn't align with the person reflecting now. That gap is where discomfort lives. The memory became less about Ali being mocked and more about an opportunity missed, an opportunity to act better, to choose respect, to recognize dignity in real time rather than in hindsight. Some would later speak of Ali with admiration, even reverence, and in those moments the memory returned uninvited. The laughter didn't match the respect. That mismatch stayed unresolved. Ali's silence had spared them embarrassment in the moment. He hadn't exposed them publicly. He hadn't demanded apology. That mercy recognized later carried more weight than confrontation ever could. Guilt deepened because it had nowhere to go. There was no apology demanded, no forgiveness requested, just the quiet knowledge that restraint had been met with carelessness. Time stripped away excuses. Context faded, only intention remained. And intention, when revisited honestly, can be uncomfortable. The laughter that once bonded people together now isolated them individually. Shared mockery turns into private reflection over time, and private reflection is rarely kind. Ali's dignity aged into wisdom. The laughter aged into regret. Time made the distinction clear without commentary. Guilt replaced laughter not because anyone forced it to, but because understanding finally caught up. The moment had been small, but the lesson was not. In the end, what hurt wasn't that Ali stayed silent. It was that he had shown restraint. They hadn't yet learned to show themselves. Strength had always been misunderstood as volume. The louder the voice, the stronger the presence. The faster the response, the greater the dominance. Muhammad Ali himself once embodied that image, and the world learned to associate power with spectacle. That is why his quiet choice felt so disruptive. It challenged a belief people didn't realize they carried. By choosing silence, Ali revealed that strength does not vanish when it pauses. It sharpens. It gathers itself. His restraint showed that power does not always move outward. Sometimes it turns inward, anchoring a person so deeply that nothing external can shake them. That moment forced a redefinition. Strength was no longer just about winning exchanges or overpowering others. It became about self-governance. Ali demonstrated that the strongest person in the room is often the one who refuses to be controlled by provocation. What made the choice so powerful was its difficulty. Anger would have been easy. A clever insult would have earned applause. Silence demanded discipline. It required Ali to resist instinct, ego, and expectation all at once. That resistance revealed a deeper mastery. People often confuse restraint with fear. Ali proved the opposite. He showed that restraint can come from confidence so complete that it doesn't need defense. When a man knows who he is, insults lose their leverage. This redefinition unsettled many observers. If strength could look like calm, then aggression lost its authority. The hierarchy people relied on suddenly felt unstable. Ali's silence quietly challenged how power had been measured for generations. His choice also exposed how reactive most people are under pressure. The expectation to respond immediately is deeply ingrained. Ali interrupted that pattern. He showed that pause is not weakness, but awareness. Over time, that awareness became the true lesson. Strength, Ali suggested, is not about controlling others. It is about controlling oneself. That idea traveled far beyond that moment, reaching anyone who had ever felt provoked. The quiet decision also redefined courage. Courage is often framed as confrontation. Ali reframed it as composure. Standing firm without striking back required a bravery that went unseen by many at the time. Ali's silence offered an alternative model of masculinity, one not rooted in dominance or intimidation, but in steadiness and integrity. That model expanded what it meant to be powerful without diminishing strength. As the years passed, people began to recognize that Ali had evolved beyond needing validation. He wasn't performing for approval anymore. He was acting from alignment. That alignment gave his silence credibility. The moment became symbolic, not because it was dramatic, but because it was intentional. One choice quietly shifted the conversation about power from external victory to internal discipline. Ali showed that strength does not demand recognition. It doesn't rush to explain itself. It remains consistent regardless of whether it is applauded or misunderstood. This redefinition also carried compassion. By not retaliating, Ali refused to escalate harm. He ended the exchange without humiliation. That restraint protected everyone involved, even those who didn't deserve it. People eventually realized that Ali's silence required trust. Trust in time. Trust in truth. Trust that dignity outlasts momentary applause. That trust was rewarded as his legacy matured. Strength, as Ali demonstrated, is the ability to remain whole under pressure, to not fracture when tested publicly, to leave a moment with your values intact. His choice reframed victory. Victory was no longer about dominance in the moment, but about integrity across time. That kind of victory cannot be taken away or reinterpreted. Ali's restraint also gave others permission to pause, to breathe, to choose composure over reaction. His example extended beyond celebrity and into everyday life. The world often celebrates those who respond loudly, but history remembers those who respond wisely. Ali understood that difference and acted accordingly. By redefining strength, Ali softened it without weakening it. He made room for calm, patience, and dignity within the idea of power. That expansion was his quiet contribution. In the end, one silent choice did more than any argument could. It reshaped how strength is recognized, practiced, and remembered. And that is why the moment still speaks. Long after the noise faded, he never raised his voice. He never defended himself. He never tried to win the moment. And yet, years later, that silence speaks louder than any punch or proclamation ever could. Because when Muhammad Ali chose restraint over reaction, he left behind more than a memory. He left a standard, a reminder that real power doesn't rush to be seen. It waits. It endures. And in the end, it outlives the noise that once tried to challenge it. That is the strength the world rarely recognizes until it sets too late to ignore.